For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Morning. Well, the world's really waiting for the results of the midterm elections in the United States. Not that they haven't been out voting, but the results take a little while to get in. Asia-Pacific stocks mixed, therefore. Also, I'll come on to this, but China's inflation has fallen as well. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong lost 1.42%. But generally speaking, what we saw out of China is a drop in inflation, and that. The important thing about this is not just about China, but also it tends to precede what happens in the United States as well. But in 1 or 2 months. The other thing about it is that China's COVID controls negatively affecting, according to Nomura, 12.2% of the national GDP, up from 9.5% only about a week ago. Many people were thinking, and again, this is a sort of strand which is running through all the markets in the world right now. They're wondering whether or not China will actually be relaxing its stringent zero COVID policy. And there are different views about this. It may be that Beijing may do it, but it may be that local administrations don't. It's still all up in the air at the moment. So let's turn to the United States. And as I said, most things paused yesterday. Futures relatively flat as we await the results of the midterm elections. The only certain thing to say about it in these kind of early results is that there isn't this sort of Republican wave which had been and the idea that there isn't that may create some sort of deadlock in the United States. And who am I to disagree once again with Morgan Stanley's chief US equity strategist Michael Wilson, who said that a divided government could help ease concerns about inflation and therefore ease the way that the Fed reacts to that. But who knows? Let's talk about Disney. People obviously awaiting the results from that. It missed out on profits. It also missed out on revenues. It's warning that its own streaming could taper off. Its Disney Plus could taper off slightly, but do remember it does have theme parks as another string to its bow as well. Elon Musk selling at least about $4 billion worth of Tesla shares after the Twitter deal. A very interesting documentary if you actually can get it. It's on the BBC iPlayer at the moment, and I watched all the episodes last night. And actually, I've been very cynical about Elon Musk, and I think I still am, and I think most of the markets are. What he certainly is a genius, but at the same time, is he a businessman? This is something which we're not quite concerned about. And what he seems to be doing is selling a lot of his assets selling a lot of his Tesla assets for the Twitter deal, and the Twitter deal is still going through this sort of verification process. Maybe Twitter will get a blue check mark and a subscription, and maybe it will shift its way onto subscription away from ads as well. We will see. EU jobs. This is an interesting one. Been having a look at some of the ads that are coming out for jobs in the EU, and particularly 6, including Germany and France. The median increase in wages is 5.5%, but in Germany particularly higher. And there's worries that there might be a sort of wage price spiral in the EU. Remember, it's not quite sure whether it's going to be pivoting towards hawkishness or dovishness right now. A number of the ECB governing members are saying that it ought to be more hawkish. Germany is also set to block a China chip deal. This is a factory in Dortmund, and it's a company called Elmos, and this is particularly important given that Scholz actually went to meet the president of China just for a day last Friday, and yet you've got the the economics minister, Robert Habeck, saying that they will block the deal. And whilst they want to nurture relationships with China, they have to be very careful about what they regard as the critical sectors of their economy, like most of the West, really. As far as the UK is concerned, another Truss idea it appears to be going out of the window. Jeremy Hunt appears to be saying that in the budget, again, we're waiting for that November the 17th, that the investment zones will be scrapped in favour of revamped urban renewal and regeneration policies. These investment zones would probably cost, because they give businesses tax breaks, about 12 billion a year. So it may be that he's trying to recoup money from that. And the Hugh Pill, who's the chief economist at the Bank of England, has been saying that it may be that the Bank of England's quantitative easing program may have added to high inflation. He also quoted gas prices, global prices, and of course US fiscal support for households, which boosted international goods prices. I think it's pretty obvious, really, but I thought I'd report it. Clearly, if you're going to print money, then it's going to increase inflation. I mean, I would have thought that's a given. Oil, crude prices edging slightly lower on particular worries about whether or not China is what China's going to do with its controls. And I just throw in some breaking news about cryptos. The cryptocurrencies had a tough day yesterday. Binance, which is a currency exchange, reached agreement to buy fellow crypto exchange FTX after the latter experienced liquidity problems. And it's only a few months ago, do you remember all that stuff from Robinhood and all the rest of it, that retail investors were getting involved? Bitcoin has fallen to its lowest level in 2 years. Just a bit of breaking news right at the end. That's the global view this morning.
All right, so two things I'd like to talk about first, about crypto and the problems with crypto. I mean, what's your take? What's the read? Is it a reaction in the market that is causing, liquidity crisis for cryptocurrencies and things like that? And secondly, also the housing market in the UK. This increase in inflation is really debilitating housing prospects in the UK. So what's really going on? In fact, in the city of Durham, for instance, they now have to start reducing quotas of university students coming into them because of housing.
Yeah, so the housing market, it varies. There is only one truth about the housing market, and it's this, that there are very few spaces available to build houses where people actually want to live. I'm not talking about new developments on floodplains or new developments, right out of the centre of towns and so on. The fact of the matter is there is always a pressure on space. Now, you draw your own conclusions from that. Yes, of course, the cost of living will have an effect, and mortgages will become unaffordable at a certain stage, but we haven't reached that stage yet. I think there will be many, many variations. What you're talking about in Durham, I presume, is the university students who can't find places to actually rent because there's simply too many students and too few places. Just adds to the general picture that, yes, there will be variations. Yes, there will be problems as far as inflation is concerned. But the general point about housing in the UK, and this is not the case in other countries because people are much more mobile. But here, the fact of the matter is there are always too few properties, and building new houses is always held up on planning regulations and so on. So that's what's happening about the housing market. Sorry, what was your other question?
Crypto. The breaking news coming in.
Crypto, yeah. Okay. So again, I think the general truth about crypto is I'm very skeptical about it, whether or not it will take over the sort of role of the fiat currencies do at the moment. But the truth I think about cryptos is the less you think about the nerdishness of them, and the more you actually use them, then they will come into common use. It's like getting on an aeroplane. Do you really understand how a jet engine works? Do you bother about it? No. You get on the aeroplane because you're convinced it will fly. When Bitcoin and the other cryptos get to that kind of stage, when you actually don't think about using them, but you are using them in any case in your payment and receiving systems, then that's when they will have arrived.
Well, I think on cryptocurrency, you've been proven right. Right from the beginning of the phenomenon, you've been saying, look, it's a very volatile market, and that It will go up and down, and that's what has happened with this liquidity crisis. But with the FTX being taken over by Binance, are there antitrust implications? Because right now, Zhao, the chairman of Binance, is the most powerful man in that space, and Bitcoin cannot even compete now with Binance in any way. So are there competition issues with one particular group dominating the entire space, as it were? As for Elon Musk, yes, very erratic, but a very pragmatic entrepreneur. This is the third time he's selling off shares since he took a stake in Twitter and took it over. Up to about $20 billion worth of shares of Tesla, sold off. But let's see what happens hereafter. And then finally, the midterm elections. The stocks rallied. The dollar also, had issues because investors and Wall Street are hoping that the Republicans will seize control of the House of Reps and probably also dominate the Senate, and that we will have a divided government, a split government, and that when government is divided and there's infighting, as we witnessed with Grover Cleveland in 1894, as we witnessed in 2011 with Obama, as we witnessed with Clinton in 2008, when Newt Gingrich created a gridlock. Are we likely to see that? Is Wall Street now playing politics with their expectations, or is it just a normal thing for Wall Street to do during midterm elections?
As far as the US midterms are concerned, I mean, we're going to have to wait for the results. I mean, everything that you say, could be possible. Of course, there could be gridlock, and the markets actually quite like that, because if there is gridlock, it means that the Democrats can't force through decisions which the markets viscerally don't like, and therefore they also feel that the Fed won't have to cope with too much more rising inflation. I mean, anything could happen. I think we should really wait to see what happens, but it looks very, very close indeed. All I can say at the moment is, from what the markets are saying and from what I'm seeing on the news wires at the moment, that the expected wave of Republican gains has not happened. That's really unusual, isn't it? For an incumbent government not to be criticised roundly for where it's gone wrong. But I would point you towards the infrastructure bill, or the inflation reduction bill, or whatever he calls it now. That started off as a $2 trillion. Do you remember that? $2 trillion program, and it was now cut to, what is it now, $690 billion. I mean, that's the sort of price that you pay for trying to push something through, which isn't done at the moment. All I would say about Elon Musk is, I mean, again, as I was saying, I was watching this documentary series last night, and I thought it was very good. The one thing about him is that, I don't know which way Twitter's going to go. Maybe it'll be, but what's going on in his brain is certainly quite extraordinary. And I have to say, when you saw that big Falcon, the big heavy lift Falcon spaceship actually take off and then come down again, and then actually land where it was supposed to land, as it were, in reverse, then you thought, there's something going on here, isn't there? The jury is very much out as to what this man is actually going to do. Maybe he will turn Twitter into a social revolution, but it will take some work, because the regulators are not going to allow him to get away with it. And basically, as far as cryptos are concerned, I would just repeat what I said, provided you don't worry about, I think the volatility is an issue, and I still think it's an issue, and it's not something that would be an investable asset class as far as I'm concerned. But then again, I'm not 21 years old, and I don't have billions or millions of dollars to throw around, as some of these kids clearly have. But all I would say is that cryptos will get there in the end, I'm sure, but it'll take a long time. Yes, they will be regulated. Yes, they aren't mainstream at the moment, but they will only become mainstream when you don't think about the mechanisms. I think that's all I could say about it right now.
All right, thanks so much, Michael, for your time. We'll move on strictly and quickly to other global news. The new African Carbon Market Initiative, which was inaugurated at COP27, aims to support the growth of carbon credit production and create jobs in Africa. Arise environment correspondent Leila Johnson-Salami reports.
Every year, Gabon's forests absorb 140 million tons of carbon dioxide, according to the UN, which is equivalent to taking 30 million cars off the road. And in 2021, due to successful forest conservation efforts, the country became the first country in Africa to receive results-based payments for reduced emissions. The Paris Agreement has set goals to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions, and the carbon market is becoming a popular way to decarbonize activities. Carbon financing is an innovative tool that places a financial value on emissions, and two types of carbon markets exist. In the compliance market like South Africa's or the EU's, laws require companies and governments to account for their emissions. And the voluntary carbon market enables individuals, companies, governments, and organizations to voluntarily offset their emissions by investing in sustainable projects. The New Africa Carbon Markets Initiative has been inaugurated at COP27, aiming to support the growth of carbon credit production and create jobs in Africa. Led by a 13-member steering committee of global leaders, CEOs, and carbon credits experts, the ACMI hopes to dramatically expand Africa's participation in the voluntary carbon market, which is where most African origin carbon credits are currently sold. A bold ambition, the ACMI aims to have 300 million credits produced annually by 2030. The coalition of organizations behind this, including the UN Economic Commission for Africa, says this level of production would unlock $6 billion in income and support 30 million jobs. By 2050, ACMI is targeting over 1.5 billion credits produced annually in Africa, leveraging over $120 billion and supporting over 110 million jobs. A key target of the ACMI is to raise the quality and integrity of African credits by increasing prices from $5 per ton in 2021 to $20 per ton. According to the ACMI, demand for African origin carbon credits has been growing at a compound annual rate of 36% between 2016 and 2021. However, delivering climate finance in Africa through carbon markets is still minimal. A three-step approach, the ACMI plans on establishing the market in the first decade, maturing it in the second, and establishing carbon credits as one of Africa's top export commodities by 2050. The ACMI may be a step in the right direction, but the complexity of carbon financing could dampen the ambition of the project. Steering committee member and executive director at the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, Joseph Nganga, called for everyone to contribute to this important effort, emphasizing the action that will be required to sustain carbon markets across the continent. If countries can develop strong carbon mechanism frameworks, carbon financing could play a vital role in restoring Africa's biodiversity and growing the economies of several countries. Leila Johnson-Salami, Arise News.